Those of us fortunate enough to be working in the arts and culture or related to a creative industry, I think have the opportunity to make a real difference to the world and to really to change lives, influence people, and show the world a better way for the future. Today in particular, I think as people appear to be more in conflict, the question of identity and belonging is relevant, and I want to tell you how our work in music production is helping to set new trends, invent new traditions, and find new forms of authenticity. So I wanted to thank you, Smrita. Thank you for inviting me to speak today and contribute to this event. So I'm here to tell you first the story of the creation of a new music album, how it represents a new identity for Indian classical music. After briefly covering the context of where it has come from, I'll share the process of how the music was made and an analysis of the different factors that have influenced the production of this music. The product, or the actual music that I will use to demonstrate my arguments, is an album called Undone, and it has resulted not only in an audio release but also has inspired other artistic ideas and a new music video. I thought this was really relevant, especially with what my co-speakers are talking about and how different artistic forms feed off each other and learn from each other. And there's also another example of a movement which we have called the Great British Gharana, which I'll talk about at the end and why that is important. I'm in a unique position of being both the researcher and one of the subjects of my research. The Ph.D. that I'm working on documents and analyzes my work as artistic director and producer of Tarang. So my research is a reflective process which must have some objective distance but is also obviously very closely intertwined with the work that I'm doing in the arts. And the messages that I wanted to share with you in my talk, the things that we have learned in doing this work, is that creating a new musical tradition like this empowers and excites people. It creates a new universal music which is symbolic of real integration. It can uplift and unite. And in the musical process, it shows a new approach for collaboration and creation that is reflective of a new hybrid form and which is authentic. In my work and my research, I often ask myself this, that why am I doing this? What's the point? And so what was all this work? So if during my talk, if any of you feel these questions occur to you, please do ask me at the end, because I must always be able to answer these questions. So briefly on the context, there are some things which many of you will already know. Indians move around the world, forming the largest diaspora. They take their cultural traditions with them, and significantly so in places like Singapore, USA, and the UK. A lot of the work that the diaspora does is well known. It's high profile, you could say. But also what's really interesting is that anecdotes and observations show, as well as some theoretical approaches, that the diaspora is different everywhere. They have different characteristics. Authors like Cohen and Anderson have talked about how they have strong retention of ties to language, to religion, to other cultural norms, and what you might call the myth of a homeland. And again, relating to what you said, Smrita, about this idea of the stereotype or the typical homeland is something which comes across in the production of art as well. So here's the first important factor that has shaped the new musical identity. In Britain, the South Asian diaspora is itself diverse, and arts in Britain are by and large for everyone, not just for the diaspora. The second aspect in this highly accurate map of diasporic travel to the UK, when Indians came to Britain, one of the things people observed, is that amongst many cultural practices was also the arrival of Indian music, and Indian classical music in particular. This came about through the migration of artists, the creation of festivals, the establishment of teachers and students in India, of Indian music in Britain, and then the rise of producers and different genre and collaborations in Indian music. many concerts, teaching, artists and productions took place. And amongst them was this concept of the Indian Ensemble, which is what I'm focusing on today. What people found and what I've found is this general observation that Indian classical music in Britain is somehow different. One of the parts of this phenomenon is the ensemble called Tarang. This was created in 2002 to provide performance, training, and development opportunities to young adult musicians. It's a new form of ensemble music, and initially the compositions were created by maestro performers or artists. Later, and what's happening currently, is that the focus shifted towards production in Indian music, already something which is different from what is done as a norm. So the focus of my research is, in my role as artistic director, to track the production of new music, live concerts, recordings, and touring. And the analysis of a number of different factors have influenced this new music creation and helped somewhat to answer these questions: that is the music distinctive? Is it modern? Is it British? Is it new? And is it even authentic? The different factors which have seemingly played a role as I've analysed the music production are historical development, the geographical location, from the top left, people in Indian music and in Indian culture, and then the role of the music business, the music industry and the art sector, including the organisation which produces Tarang's music, Milapfest. There's also an important factor in the cultural identity of the people who produce, perform, and consume the music. There's also the question of the market: where is this music going to? And the musical identity itself. What's it like anyway? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And why have we produced music like this? So my argument is that there is a confluence of a number of unique factors, unique to Britain in particular, which have led to the creation of a new genre of Indian classical music here. The arts and culture of Britain are well known, not only for being the birthplace of some of the greatest influences globally, but also because of what happens in Britain. I know it's difficult to see some of the actual words here, but the point of this is to show the different diversity which we all know about and which is well documented. We see also first of all, the proximity and availability of other global influences as it being a key benefit to the production of new music in Britain. So let's listen first of all to a small clip of one of Tarang's first influences in this album, a remaking of an Italian classical piece by Nicola Piovani, which was made famous by the film Life is Beautiful. To cut short any of Tarang's pieces, but a lot of music to demonstrate. But the point here is to show you how Tarang was influenced first by the Italian classical tradition, and you'll get to see more of why that's important later. The historical development in Britain is also crucial to the development of new musical identity here. In short, you could probably do big disservice to the history of music here and just say, in a way, it's the emergence of Ravi Shankar to the emergence today of Anushka Shankar and everything that's happened in between. We've had the Beatles, the many concerts and festivals which took place, tours, teaching and learning has established here, and then there have been many recent pioneers too in the development of music. For Milapfest's part, what we did as an organization is to create a number of ensembles and invent a tradition which we felt was necessary for the audience, which was important in taking Indian classical music forward, and of course which was interesting. The first set of composers who influenced music here were, you could say, from two of the great musical cities of India, Chennai and Kolkata. And in this album, Undone, one of the pieces is a tribute to that, called Kolkata Blues. So I'll play you a small excerpt of that. And again, it's the same album, same set of musicians, and you can hear what kind of work we've done with this. So you might be able to notice a pattern emerging here that we're playing with all traditional Indian classical instruments, but using them in very different ways. In this case, we have the influence from Kolkata, but we have harmonies, we have voices, and North and South Indian instruments being used together in ways which is not normally done in Indian classical music. So these people have all played influences on as role models. There are, as it happens, three wonderful composers and artists who are pictured here, who have all been very influential in Britain: Anushka Shankar, Rupa Banisar, and Jyotsna Shrikant. And people like that have also created an environment and an atmosphere here in Britain where you can actually make things happen which are different. There have been also the action, the very deliberate action of founders of different ensembles, of organization, and funders like the Arts Council and sponsors who support this work. So these people have all played a role in the creation of new music, and it brought the question of, is it just something in the environment, or is it something very deliberate which is deciding how this music goes forward? And of course, that's where I must also bring in an analysis of my own role as a producer here as well. Once again, seeing one of the key influences in Britain, in order to establish a musical identity, Tarang was faced with the choice of taking from something very recognizable and established and showing what an Indian music ensemble can do with it. This is an introductory video to the new musical identity, showing a way in which the ensemble wanted to proceed. So I'm sure this is a song which many of you will recognize, and for us this was an important way in to a new musical identity. And music videos like this are not usually done. There are ways in which we have produced this which is very unusual for an Indian music ensemble. I wanted to conclude with running through some of the many different factors which have influenced the music as well. And I'll do this briefly so that we can come more to a discussion later after that with the panel. One of the big influences I mentioned already, so I won't elaborate on this, is the role of the producer, Milapfest, the arts funding, and giving that the access to management, organization, production, leadership and guidance, really key factors in the ability to produce music. The cultural identity, the musicians, producers, audiences, I already mentioned this at the beginning. You can see from this photograph itself, these are the people of Darang, these are the musicians. Even the way they present themselves, the way they want to appear in publicity and photography, this is different from the staged shots on classical performances that usually are there. I might play this excerpt later when we're having the panel discussion to elaborate one of the points. And most importantly, from the business point of view, the endeavor with this musical identity was to take the music into the marketplace. So elaborating on what I said before, taking it into mainstream publications, into streaming, merchandise, all of these things which you could say are almost like bad words for classical or traditional music, but something which should be done to popularize and take the form, especially to break down barriers of labeling and identification of what Indian music ought to be like. And there are also aspects of musical identity, the perception. So with the video and the audio clips I've played, it breaks perception in how a classical concert ought to be set up, how the lighting should be done, what could work, what is authentic, what isn't. These are key aspects of the research that I'm doing. And you can see different influences here, people from both the British and the Indian context in these photographs. Finally, with the concept of the album itself, which is currently on tour and being released, the 11 tracks are very different in their approach, very different in their theme, in their identity, and the way they come across. This video I saved for when we play, but I'll show you a small clip of it so you get the idea. When we were producing this album, we were approached by a film director in Chennai who reacted to it very strongly and said, I have to make a piece of art to reflect your music. I'll show you it in full. I'll share this with you in full online, actually. But the point is that a production like this needed a piece of art like this. And I think I'll play it when we come through to the discussion. But it tells its own story. And again, it's something which has not been done before. And it brought us to the question, what is tradition? What is a new tradition? There are performances which are improvised, imbibed. There's the traditional pedagogy of the guru-disciple. There's the production in Indian classical music, which is normally spontaneous, which is inherent to the classical artist. And the identity, which is normally this maestro tradition, and the idea of solo duets. The new tradition which we are creating has produced performances, rehearsed, practiced, with pedagogy more about inspiration. So people who are learning and growing in this country are more inspired and absorbing ideas rather than being told this is what you can and this is what you can't do. And finally, the identity comes more into bands and companies, something which is going out of the classical tradition. So importantly for us, what we found is this, in this model of artistic expression, it's vital for the people who are playing this music, who are born and brought up here, to have this personal expression of their own cultural identity, to express themselves as humans, and also it makes a big difference in helping us to bring people together of different communities, different backgrounds, and show that really art doesn't belong into different ghettos or different areas of the world, but it's something which can be universal and belong to everyone. Thank you.